Tommy, this is the second time you and I have been on stage, so if you wouldn't mind, please tell the audience a little bit more about your background.
Well, I'm an old football player who got recruited to play at Navy by a fellow named Steve Belichick, and his son, Bill, was my age, so I really had two coaches. One that just screamed at me, and the other that wrote handwritten notes on everything I was doing wrong and how to correct it. So I joined the Navy, was in the submarine force, commanded the USS San Juan. And the reason that's important to this group is the San Juan was SSN 751, the first of its class, an improved 688. And it was named after a World War II cruiser, CG-52, who was the USS San Juan in the World War II. And they had a mascot of the panther. And so we adopted on the submarine, as it was commissioned, the panther as our mascot too, and had a relationship with the crew members. And they were all pretty old by the time I took command of the USS San Juan from World War II. But we had a lot of Carolina Panther paraphernalia on the ship because the Panthers, it was just a great logo. And I got permission from the NFL to adopt that as our logo on the ship. And so I feel like I belong here in North Carolina. I feel like I'm finally back to where I belong because I had that. And I grew up in Tennessee, not too far from here, and I spent a lot of time in the western North Carolina. Almost every weekend I'd go down to the Nantahala River Gorge and go canoeing or tubing or just camping out in western North Carolina. So, you know, I'm not quite a native, but I certainly feel like one after that experience. And after the Navy, I got out, 15 years in industry, been a CTO for the last 10 years, and certainly have a love for technology and the things that can be done and will be done through the use of technology.
Well, thank you. And you're definitely a brave man if you've tubed the Nantahala. So
it's cold.
It's cold. So we've heard a lot this morning about emerging technologies. I'd like to move that in a slightly different direction and talk a little bit more about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So as governments start incorporating these new elements in their operations, how do you think an agency can determine how well it's protected against cyber threats?
Well, I think the best way to go about thinking of that is through the NIST 800 series in cyber, 161, 157. We helped write 193, which is hardware resiliency, since we're really a hardware company. And so the issue is not, are you going to be attacked? It's when you're attacked, how do you respond? You will be attacked, either through ransomware or a criminal element or a nation state, just bad actors that are trying out things. The advanced persistent threat is real. And you know, it's no boogeyman. It's not like the CIA thinking there's an agent around every corner. No, this is a real threat, and they're pretty persistent. A lot of what they're doing today is use of AI in developing malware. And so they're rapidly changing things at work to make it work better. And so you got to stay one step ahead. So when you're looking at a risk management framework, you got to look at what's the real crown jewels of my agency or my mission, what would stop me from doing what I do. And I think that's the key idea that you want to keep in mind when you're looking at, hey, how can I address the risk? You can't do everything. The zero risk, if you tell your boss you're going to get zero risk in our network, that's infinite cost. And there are not many bosses that have infinite cost budgets that they can provide to IT. So you've got to smartly decide what's the greatest threat to what I have, what are the real things that have to be protected. Zero trust is a very valid thing going up there. HP spends about $3 billion a year in research. Now we're a $60 billion company, so that's about average for a Silicon Valley-based company. But in the $3 billion, about half of that is in cybersecurity, so about $1.5 billion a year. We're in our 6th generation of cyber in our products today. The 7th generation's in the lab being tested, ready for next year. And an 8th generation is in our planning books. And we get together quarterly with all our lab directors and start thinking, what do we need to do next? Trying to stay one step ahead of the threat. And the thing that I think this year that's really been the big breakthrough is we've used AI techniques in deep learning, which is a form of machine learning, but it's a convolutional neural network. And we've been able to use that on hundreds of millions example of malware with the objective of trying to predict where the AI tools will take the advanced persistent threat and the next malware they put out. So if you can do some prediction and kind of understand the DNA, the organization, the structure of malware compared to good software, you can do some tricks in predicting. And in the lab, we were getting about 99% accuracy in new malware detection. And so we isolate that off and put it in a sandbox and make sure before it operates on the machine, somebody's validated, yeah, it looks bad, but here's why. We understand why it looks like malware, but we let it go. And most of the time, it really is malware. And so in the field, we put this out in April, we're getting well over 96% accuracy. You know, nothing works in the field like it does in the lab. So if somebody tells you our lab testing says this, expect a little bit less performance, and we expected that. We're tickled to get 96% identification of new malware. And so that stops the zero-day threat, the first attack. You don't want to be first because you never saw it coming. Now, machine learning will pick up things that you know about, and that's going to be the majority of the attacks. But the hard ones are the ones you've never seen before.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the biggest cyber vulnerabilities are that government face?
Well, the way we look at it is it's the endpoints. And you know, there's layers of defense in networks, but the endpoint is really where the rubber meets the road. That's where the attack begins. That's where most vulnerabilities exist. And being an old Navy guy, I think of it as a chain, the links in the chain. You know, the attacker is always going to hit the weakest link because that's where the break's going to be. Most entities, most agencies or industry, the printer is the weakest link. Most people don't think of the printer as being a computer. It is a computer. So we, in our business, we do workstations and laptops like this one, and we do desktops, but we also do printers, 2D printers, all the way from your thing you'd have at home, all the way to your office, to your big, you know, massive A3 machines. We do page-wide printer, things that would work on a magazine, publish your next version of GQ or, you know, whatever magazine, Sports Illustrated, that you know, read on a routine basis. But they have paper going by at about 25 miles per hour on these machines. The control systems are phenomenal. They put 4 billion drops of ink on a page of paper per second, accurately in the right place with the right color. It just amazes me that it works, but it does work, and it works every time. I mean, very few breakdowns occur. Couldn't because they got production schedules to make. But when you're looking at these endpoints, and the 3D printer is one of those, that is most 3D print manufacturers don't even think of cybersecurity. And they'll tell you, hey, we don't even hook up our 3D printer to the internet. And you ask them, well, okay, well, how do you get the files to your 3D printer if they're not on the internet? How do you get we use USB drives. And you kind of think, well, they're not really that safe. You know, that might be a problem. You better check those out well before you stick it in your printer. And we were talking earlier, 3D print. North Carolina is known for being a textile industry, and a lot of that has picked up and moved because of cost reasons and industry reasons and overseas competitiveness. I just recently got put on the U.S. Council of Competitiveness at the U.S. Big honor for me, and just brilliant people on this panel. And they got all excited when I told them one of the things in our research bucket is using our 3D printers to print textiles. And so it's a whole new way of designing clothes and textile environment, is being able to print them out in an industrial scale 3D printer. And these things are, you know, about 500,000 each. They're not toys, they're not prototypes, but they're full-scale productions. And so there's some, you know, you might be seeing some HP 3D printers in North Carolina before long. I certainly hope so, and bring back part of that textile industry to the U.S.
But as they're thinking about that, then it means they're going to have to ensure the security of their supply chain.
Absolutely.
So how would they do that?
Yeah, supply chain security is a big issue in Washington, and I'm based out of Washington, D.C. I serve on the DHS task force in supply chain risk management, and we just finished our first year of the task force. We got one more year to go. I co-chaired the threat evaluation task force, and let me tell you, there are a lot of threats out there. So I had 120 members of the working group, ask them each to go out and give me your 5 biggest threats in your industry and your agency and the mission that you're trying to do, and thinking that they would coalesce to 10 or 20 major threats. We ended up with a possible 600, 120 times 5. We ended up with 258 unique threats. And then tried to categorize. We kind of bound those down into 9 different areas. But there's a lot of risk out there based on these threat and threat vectors. And one of the things you can do, one of the easiest things for you to do, is know the people you work with. That's basic, simple business 101. All successful business is based on trust. I learned that from Glenn Urban when I was up at MIT. He was the dean of the Sloan School. He made a whole career in marketing on that one simple idea, trust-based marketing, and must have written hundreds of papers, all with a single theme, trust-based marketing. And it's very, very true that if you don't trust the people you're working with, you're not going to be successful over the long term. Well, how that translates to supply chain security is there's no way to trust them if you don't get to know them. You have to spend time with your suppliers. And what we've learned in this task force is you can't stop with your direct suppliers. You have to understand and have relationships with the people that supply them. Now, in government, that can be somewhat hard based on a contractual relationship, that if you're not putting it in your contract that you're going to go down and inspect their suppliers at the second and third tier, there can be prohibitions against doing that. And so we're trying to convince the federal government through this DHS task force that they need to start putting that in their contracts. Privity of contract is something that has to be overcome so that we can form a team where we all trust each other and therefore have better interactions and working relationships.
So take us home with this last question. We've all heard about ransomware attacks recently.
Yeah.
What can we learn from the most recent ones, and how do we go forward?
Well, I live up near Baltimore, and that was hit pretty hard, and it cost a lot of money, and it got in the paper, and it wasn't just the services stopped for a while, but the taxpayers of Baltimore are going to be paying for that for a long time to come, and it wasn't there was upset when they couldn't get the trash picked up, and the other things that happened. They couldn't get the data from their motor vehicles or their license renewed. That was a problem, but that was a minor problem. When they got the tax bill, that was a major problem. And City of Atlanta, I've been down and talked with the CIO of the state of Georgia, very, very familiar with the City of Atlanta. That's an issue, and he's interested in his procurement of endpoints, which is our business. He wants the best cyber on the market today, and you can't blame him. I mean, you're not just trying to buy something at the lowest cost that may save you $1 every box, maybe $5 every box if you get a cheaper hard drive, or you don't put some of the security features that we have. We have something where when you click a link, which is usually the cyber hygiene problem, you inadvertently click a bad link and malware comes down. Well, you click a link on our high-end machines, the malware is downloaded into a virtual machine. Every link goes to a virtual machine. Nothing's downloaded to your boss. So when you close out the browser, the malware disappears. It doesn't infect the machine, so you're much better protected. But if you try to save money at the edges and you end up paying $15 million, $150 million for ransomware attack, have you really saved your agency, your government any money? The answer is no. It's a total cost evaluation. And if you're not trying to buy the best cyber on the market today for your printers, your computers, for your network devices, you might be taking in risks you didn't even know about.
Good cautionary tale. Thank you, and it's always a pleasure. I'm always a little bit more frightened after we talk, but it's important to know.
Well,
Thank
there
you,
are
Tommy.
solutions. I mean, there are, and the nice point is we're not standing still. That $1.5 billion invested in cyber, and other companies are doing similar things. It's not just HP. It's trying to stay ahead of the threat. They're investing too, but we're doing everything we can to predict, to analyze, and to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. And it's, you go to conferences like DEF CON or Black Hat, and you realize the bad guys are there. You're meeting them, and they're telling you about all the fun things they did, and you're taking notes because you want to say, "Oh, wait a minute, we got to be prepared." So,
Thank you, Tommy.
thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Yeah.